Hey there, it's Wednesday, and greetings from a very snowy Wisconsin. But I still wanted to be out here in the wild talking to you. And I thought I'd share this week a little update on some of my creative goings on, particularly the world building I'm doing right now for the fantasy series I'm working on. And it reminded me of a story. I've been working on this since, like I've mentioned before, since high school, early college. And a friend of mine, Rich Wood, and I he used to read all those stories back then. And he and I at the time were joking once because like maybe I was leaning a little too much into the source material of D&D and Dungeons and Dragons, where I actually had a character in my stories introduce himself to other people that he was a thief, and we laughed because as if it's some sort of profession that you go around telling people like you're a blacksmith. Anyway, that's taking it too far. Nowadays, I'm still using Dungeons and Dragons and other systems like that as inspiration for fantasy and sci-fi series, but what I'm trying to do is be a little more realistic about it. Something that came out pre-pandemic through Kickstarter that really caught my eye and I had to support was this role-playing game called Quest. And what really attracted me to it was not only it has like some really cool artwork in it, but it's a really simple system designed for people that don't want to get bogged down on the mechanics and just want to have fun, play, story tell. So I got that, and I really have enjoyed it. And I during the pandemic created a setting for it, a campaign, and it was a combination of a typical fantasy swords and sorcery kind of world, but also I tried to fuse in Roman Empire influence because that's a historical area that I'm super into. So I did that, and I wound up playing a session virtually with some friends on it, and we had fun. But what also came out of that was I wrote a story during the pandemic called The Shard of Doom, which is now intended to be the first story of the four short story collection that's going to make up book one of my fantasy series. And it was fun. I didn't put a lot of time or thought into it. I just wrote. But the point being is now that I want to do something with it, I need to really look at it with a more critical eye. So I've been looking at world building and kind of the realism around it. For example, I drew a map back then for the story, and now that I'm like looking at things like travel times and mileage and distance between point A and point B and making it realistic, I'm redoing the map and actually trying to pay attention to those things. I'm also working on the spell system that's in the game and the magic system. There's a main character named Sazzer who's a magician, and he casts a bunch of spells in the Shard of Doom. And I want to make sure now that I'm paying attention to what spells he has in his spell book, as it were, how toiling each of them are on him. So therefore, how many can he cast in a day, and those kind of details. And I think what I'm learning too, and it's maybe how I've always felt, is that you don't want to get bogged down in world building to the point where you're kind of paralyzing yourself and overthinking things. But you do want to put as much realism and consistency in there as you can, because readers will notice those things, and you yourself will get tripped up if you're not paying attention. So with that being said, it's 2 weeks now that starting today that the Gorgon Void is going to be in the hands of the editor I've been using. So that means 2 weeks where I am not touching it, and I'm leaving the Gamma Trita universe alone. And I'm having a blast right now doing a bunch of world building and just writing notes and figuring out things for my fantasy series. And I'm super excited that you're all going to get to see it next year. As always, thanks for listening, and talk to you next week.